Hello everybody, hope you're doing okay. I just thought to myself, of all the 4 Adidas shoes that I bought recently, the Boston 10, the Adios 6, the Prime X and the Adios Pro 2 here, this Adios Pro 2 is the only one that I haven't actually done a dedicated review on. I featured it in some shoe-offs, and initially, if you might remember, I thought it was a rather wobbly shoe and didn't really like it at all. Well, it's funny how sometimes appearances can be deceptive, and since then it's actually been a shoe that I've worn to more and more and more. And I've actually taken out for quite a lot of different runs, from sort of long, easy sort of Sunday runs to more sort of medium-term tempo runs, and even a couple of faster sort of threshold type runs. And as I've now got it up to 71 miles, I thought it'd be time to sort of give you a bit of a medium-term review of it and to show you how I'm liking it. So I'll give you a quick overview of the shoe first of all. So for comparison, here is the Adios Pro 2 at the top here, and here's the original Adios Pro 1. So if we start with the uppers, the upper on the Adios Pro 2 is now called Celomesh 2 compared to Celomesh 1, obviously, on the first one. I would say it's actually a slightly thinner material and very breathable. Very much reminds me of Vaporweave on the Next% original version. And I think that's why I quite like it, because it really does hug the foot very well across the midfoot. If I actually bring up my other foot here with my actual foot in, you see I'm very well locked in across there. Got a bit of room in the toe box. You know that I'm not really quite long enough for a UK 12.5, but I think it's more than usable. Not much there, but I can certainly deal with that. We've actually got 7 eyelets plus the option to do a double knot in the Adios Pro 2 here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and that compares to only 6 with the double knot option on the original version. It doesn't have these extra holes that the Adios Pro 1 did, but I'm finding that the lockdown is actually sort of better. I think it just wraps the foot here. I would say the tongue is now semi-gusseted, whereas the original one was just obviously a full gusseted there. This very similar tongue material, very thin material, but yeah, nicely little cushion there. What I've actually done there is actually taken the laces out of the little holder there, because I found that I was able to get a better lockdown with them out. It was just like getting in the way basically. So that's a sort of a tip if you think you're having problems. The heel counter is, as you might expect in a racing shoe, nothing to it at all. I think if anything it's slightly more flimsy than the original. Well, very similar, that's very flappy as well. If we turn them over to the side, you can even see that on the Adios Pro 2 it even tells you the stack 39mm, so it's just inside the legal 40 limit. There's a bit of debate as to whether it's an 8mm drop shoe or a 10mm drop shoe. I've seen both ones there, but it sort of feels to me more like a 10mm drop shoe, but there's some debate whether that's actually 31mm there or 29 obviously for a 10, but I think the 31 is perhaps the consensus, but certainly it's at least 8 and maybe 10. So one of those I was not entirely sure. But the big difference is that you've got this sort of sculpted out bit here there, which decreases the weight, but it also rather changes the feel of the shoe. So whereas on the original it was almost like a prototype really, the original, wasn't it? It was almost like, here's a shoe that we've got some this new light strike retro material and we'll just put it out there and see how we go. You kind of feel with this one they've actually made an effort to actually finish it off, and you've got the energy rods here, which are unlike a carbon plate, they're just basically 5 rods that kind of hug the toes effectively. Whereas here you can just about see them through the red. Now don't forget, this is the Adios Pro 2 is a shoe that I've actually run 71 miles in, and the wear is actually pretty good. I'm not really seeing any obvious wear. Obviously it was a bit dirty because I've been wearing it. You can see sort of areas where it's slightly starting to degrade, but no sort of splits yet, and it's not coming away. It's very thin material there, but I'm hoping that I'll be able to get at least 200 miles in that before it starts to maybe sort of peel off. I haven't done as many miles in the original one, probably done about 30 or 40 miles in that one, and that's sort of fine, no obvious problems there. You've obviously got the light strike fully exposed here, but no particular problems here. Nice bit of rubber in the back just to stop any heel problems there. What I do find is that the Pro 2 it just feels slightly more curved on foot, and you can see where you're meant to land is like quite curved there, and it really does accentuate that sort of landing feeling. Whereas in the original one it was a bit of like curve there, but it felt like a lot flatter. So in terms of my new scoring system, I think for fit I'm going to give this one an 8 out of 10. Just mark it down at 1 point because initially it was kind of fiddly with the laces, and it took me a while to realize that it was actually better fit if I took the laces out of that little holder, and perhaps also mark it down personally because they don't really do quite the exact right size for me. But 8 out of 10 is pretty good. Hugs it very well across the midfoot, and certainly got a lot of shoes that sort of fit me far worse than this one. Now certainly one problem I did find initially, as I mentioned, that it did feel very wobbly, and I think that's just until you got used to it. I found that if I was just walking along, then it was like more landing on your heel, obviously. It just felt really, really unstable. And as you sort of went through the paces, it got gradually better until I kind of realized after a few runs, it really does force you to have a midfoot landing. So I think if you are a heel striker, you may run into a bit of problems here, because definitely when I sort of rock back down the hills, that's when it feels a bit unstable. But once you get used to it, it's actually quite a nice sort of feeling. It really does sort of feel like you're landing midfoot and just helping to sort of spring off the road. It's quite a soft material relatively. I mean, in a way, I feel it's almost as soft as sort of the Zoom X. Nowhere near as soft as, say, Fuel Cell though, which means that what you do find is that it's nice and soft feeling on foot, but you also get that rebound off the road. That's one criticism I've had of Fuel Cell, especially in the Rebel 2. It's just such a soft material that you just feel like you're sort of sinking in it as well as pushing you forward. So that's a really nice touch, I think, from Adidas. And if you remember from my shoe off against the Next Percent 2, there was really nothing to choose between them. I still feel that the Next Percent 1 will be my favourite just because it hugs my foot better, but I think this one is a great contender. It's slightly cheaper, and this time they've actually made them available. You can actually buy them in all sizes on the Adidas UK website at the moment. In terms of speed, I think I'm going to have to give this a 9 out of 10. I think the only reason why I didn't give it a 10 out of 10 compared to the Next Percent 1 is I still think I prefer that as my race shoe, but certainly they did as well as the Next Percent 2. So I think in that case, the Next Percent 2 and the Adios Pro 2 would have to be a 9 out of 10, wouldn't they? And that is obviously what you need in a shoe designed for racing. What I've also done is I feel myself on the treadmill at different speeds, just to sort of see if you can see this wobbling feeling. So I'll show some footage of that now, and hopefully it sort of illustrates that it's perhaps more stable than perhaps you might think, but it just does take a bit of getting used to, I must say. So certainly if you're in the market for a new super shoe, as it were, and one that you can actually use for a variety of things. I actually had quite an enjoyable Sunday run in it at sort of a more moderate pace, and it really does sort of help me to get going. I certainly found, I did an initial run in the Nova Blast 2 the other night, and I found these doing a similar run the next night so much easier, just for the fact they were just a lot lighter. The weights is about, in my size, it's about 285 grams. So the weight's come down about 15 grams from the original, which was about 300. So it's not the lightest of the carbon racers, but I certainly think that it's a decent option for not just racing, but any sort of your longer runs, your tempo runs. And as I said, it's not too bad if you're even going fairly slowly in, which is kind of surprising in a way. And it does often make me think, do I really need to have everyday trainers anymore? When some of these shoes like this are so much more cushioned than sort of the flats of old, and you go out in a shoe like this and you sort of feel good afterwards. So in terms of an overall score, I think I have to give this one a 9 out of 10 actually. It's certainly a shoe that's warming on me.
perhaps a slight nagging doubt in my head that it's not quite long enough. So if it was half a size longer, it would be almost perfect, I think. But I'm trying to review these shoes objectively, not just personally for me. So yeah, 9 out of 10. So it's certainly a shoe that I would definitely recommend you go and check out if you haven't already done so. And certainly way better than the Boston 10 and the Adios 6, although those shoes are of course sort of more budget affairs. The Prime X is kind of sort of a similar shoe, but obviously it's not a legal shoe. I'm still getting a hang of that one. I've only actually worn that one once yet, but this one just feels a bit more sort of like normal, although it's sort of 39mm stack. It just feels that you aren't sort of on the sort of pogo sticks on this one. So I hope you enjoyed this little update on the Adios Pro 2. Certainly a shoe that I would recommend, and I'll be continuing to wear it. In fact, I'll go and head off for some miles now. Hope you found this interesting and all that. Like and subscribe, and bye!